Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast for Tuesday, June the 24th. I am Zach Ewing with Scott Rabalais and Koki Riley. We are recording this Monday. The podcast is publishing Tuesday. We are recording Monday, and Rab and Koki are still stuck in Omaha. It has been a long, drawn-out process there in the great state of Nebraska, Baton Rouge North, et cetera, and they, because the championship series could have gone to Monday, plane tickets are for Tuesday, and changing them, it turns out, is pretty difficult when there's like 20,000 LSU fans in town and all trying to get back to Louisiana. So you guys got a day to kind of see the sights there in Omaha, whatever you hadn't already seen.
We went to Twisted Fork today, and we got the chicken fried bacon. We've probably lost 2 years of our lives combined by eating this, but it was pretty good. We wanted to try it. That was the one sightseeing thing we did, because everything else has been either radio hits for me, a column for Rab, a story for me, an interview with Jay. We caught up with him just before they got onto the plane, on the bus to the airport in Omaha. So it's been a busy day, even though there's no more baseball. It's the life of a sports reporter, I guess.
Well, hopefully you'll have a chance, Rab, to kind of kick your feet up a little bit tonight and have a drink and just kind of reflect and relax on a job well done by you guys and of course by LSU baseball, which is what this show is about. We're recapping national championship number 8 for LSU. All of our postseason coverage of LSU baseball has been brought to you by Our Lady of the Lake Health, the official championship health partner of LSU athletics. We had a post-game show yesterday. Rab was on for a bit. Myself and Reed Darcy talked. It's actually hard to get the actual beat writer on those post-game shows because you are writing. And Rab's able to take a few minutes. Koki, you're down doing interviews. So it'll be good to get your thoughts on this too. But some of the stuff we talked about, we will go back over today as far as LSU's legacy and what this means and all that sort of thing. But first, let's just go, Koki, since we didn't have you on the post-game show, your immediate thoughts after covering the 2 games this weekend, LSU winning a couple of close games, 1-0 and 5-3 over Coastal Carolina, and securing the bag, securing that 8th title.
Honestly, pretty shocking, pretty surprising. It's amazing how far, I guess, we have gone. This program has gone since we were standing there or sitting there in the press box when Little Rock took a 5-1 lead in the second inning of the regional. And now we're here, and they've won their 8th national championship in second in 3 years. And now we're talking about the beginning of potentially a dynasty of baseball here in Baton Rouge. And it's pretty unbelievable how things can change. And again, it's to look back at this entire postseason run and say Little Rock was the only team that beat them. It's unbelievable considering some of the teams that they had to face against to secure this national championship. And I guess my other takeaway would just be just how different this team is than the one that won it 2 years ago. Like, this team is as different as you could possibly expect, ask for, whatever. I mean, that team was filled with players who were recruited and brought to this program by Paul Mainieri. Jay Johnson even said it after the game yesterday. He said, he thought the first one was the first one, in the sense that he thought him and his staff were well equipped to help those players reach their potential. They weren't technically his players, but they were very good players nevertheless, and he helped them reach their potential, winning the title. And yes, there was Paul Skeens and Tommy White. I'm not going to, diminish those guys at all, but the core of that team was Paul Mainieri players and Paul Mainieri recruits, even the freshmen. This team is not that. This team is, the vast majority of them are Jay Johnson players. The vast majority of them came to this team just this past offseason, which kind of makes this even more remarkable, where they basically remade the team this offseason, and then they went out and won the national championship in year 1 of it. It's a pretty stunning turnaround. And I've got to say, like, if they can win the championship with the circumstances they went through this offseason, what can they do when they go through a more normal offseason, which is what this offseason expects to be?
Yeah, and we will go into that today too. Rab, you've covered a lot of these national championship runs now for LSU. How many is this five of the 8 you've covered?
Person?
Maybe not. Well, you weren't there 2 years ago.
No, I wasn't. We were out of the country.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was in 96, 97, 2000. And so this is the fourth one I've seen in person. Saw them play for the title in 2017. But yeah, it was only the fourth. It's been a long time. It's been 25 years since I covered them winning the national championship. But it's got a familiar feel to it. LSU's like they've been the best program in college baseball over this span. However you want to quantify it. From their first College World Series appearance 40 seasons ago, 1986. To their first national title in 1991. That's the most appearances, 20 of any team in that span. It's the most national titles in that span of anyone, 8. And USC is still the program that's won the most. They had 12 national titles. But since they won most of them were won in the 60s and 70s, and quite frankly, a less competitive era of college baseball, much less. And since LSU won their first one, USC has only won one of those 12. Back in 1998. And since USC won that last one, LSU's won 4, and that's the most of anyone in that time span in the 2000s. So it's a lot of way. In any ways you slice it up, this has become the best college baseball program in the country historically and currently. The currently can change a lot, obviously, but winning 2 out of 3 titles, it's hard to argue with that, and that's where. Koki talked about, are we seeing the budding of a new dynasty at LSU? A second dynastic, run for LSU. Obviously, you look at the 1991 to 2000, 5 titles in 10 years. I've always said this is going to be impossible to duplicate because college baseball is so much more competitive now. But they might be able to come pretty close. Let's see how the next 6 or 7 years pan out.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would be surprised if they said starting in 2023, LSU won certainly 3 titles in those 10 years or 4 titles in those 10 years, like 5, that's maybe a stretch, but LSU is 40% of the way there after just 3 years. So, and with a completely different team, I might add. I mean, completely different team. So LSU beats Coastal Carolina. They did fly back home today. They get the hookup. They can come home the next day. So LSU flew back into Baton Rouge this afternoon. They are having a rally out at the box Wednesday evening. So that's one note for people who did not get to go up to Omaha, or even if you did, you can go out to Alec Box on Wednesday night and cheer on the team and celebrate with them. And imagine how small the font needs to get on the Intimidator, or how much bigger it's going to have to get for putting another year up there.
Or they shrink Mike the Tiger's head a little bit.
It's just. That's what LSU does. And as we kind of talk about this team's legacy specifically, guys, I think there's a couple things. And one, Koki, you touched on it, that this is a very different team from 2 years ago in a lot of different ways. The other one that I would throw out there is that this is the team that kind of allows you to call this college baseball's greatest program, because look, they had that dynastic decade, right? The 5 titles in 10 years. But then it was 9 years before they won another one. And then it was 14 years before they won the 7th. And so it was kind of like, okay, they're still a very good program. But outside of that 10-year stretch, it's just kind of been a good program that wins a national title every 10 to 12 years, like several other programs have done. This one, to me, and especially if they were to back it up with a third one, now you have a second dynasty. And that's the legacy of this team to me, Koki, is that they sort of brought LSU back, not just near the top of college baseball programs, but very clearly at the top of college baseball programs.
Yeah, this is the best program in college baseball right now, and I don't feel like I'm overreacting by saying that at all, because if you look at the history, you look at the fans, you look at the success, the 2 titles in 3 years, especially in this era of college baseball where there's the transfer portal and NIL, and it just creates this level of chaos to where you're getting different champions almost constantly in all these other sports. So if you can win consistently with all these different players and in this changing landscape, it just shows that you're the best. And Jay Johnson has proven that he's probably the best coach in college baseball at the moment. And yeah, like you said, like I wrote this in my game story, which you can now you can see at theadvocate.com, at NOLA.com. You can get in a poster now. You can get in a book now. But I wrote about sort of how like this could be the start of something like a dynasty. You mentioned the Skip Bertman titles, the 5 and 10 years. I mean, I mentioned the Celtics in the 60s, the Yankees in the 90s, the UConn women's basketball team in the 2010s. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different examples. I don't want to just limit it to those three, but those were the teams that I sort of mentioned as like, that's a dynasty. Like, what is a dynasty? And this team by winning this championship sort of starts the kernel is the first kernel of something that could turn into that. And we'll see what they do next year and in the next, 4 or 5 years. But if they win, 1 or 2 more titles over the next 2 or 3 years, that's a dynasty, right? Like that 3 championships in 4 years or 3 championships in 5 years. That's where we can seriously have the conversation. And I think this title, this championship really starts that conversation right now.
You got a shot, right? We had the best run LSU's had. They won in back-to-back in 96 and 97, didn't win for 2 years, and then won in 2000. Or you look at 93, didn't win in 94 and 95, then won 2. So 3 and 5 years is the best LSU has done, overall. So do they have a shot to do it? It's going to be hard. I mean, this is the 6th straight year an SEC team has won the national championship. This is not just LSU. When LSU won their very first title, only one SEC school had ever won the College World Series before. That was Georgia the year before. They got really hot with their pitching, and they won it in 1990. And Georgia hadn't really been all that close to a title since. But obviously you've had Tennessee and Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Vanderbilt and a lot of these schools. Texas, of course, have joined the SEC, and they've won. They've been a national power for 70 years. So it's Oklahoma's won a national title. So there's a lot of schools now. South Carolina trying to get back to that level. There's a lot of schools now that can do it, and it's compared to when LSU won their first one. But so the challenge is there, but the possibilities are there as well.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. I mean, it's not going to be easy. No championship is ever easy, but you can see, and that's sort of the other half of this to me. What this team's particular legacy is that they were able to. Because normally, when you say dynasty, I think included in that is like, okay, you mentioned the Yankees, Koki. The Yankees of the 50s. We have Yogi Berra, we have Mickey Mantle, we have Whitey Ford. We have, those players were on all of those teams. The 90s, you have Derek Jeter, you have Bernie Wilson, you have Jorge Posada, you have Andy Pettitte. Those players were on all of those teams. This LSU dynasty, if that's what it becomes, was built with one championship led by, your Dylan Cruz, your Paul Skeens, your, Tommy White, a lot of those players left over, like you said. I don't want to leave anybody out, but you could list all of them. And then this year's team obviously was more led by Jared Jones and Stephen Milam, and of course the great pitching duo of Anderson and Irons. And if LSU wins another title, even if it's next year, which we can talk about next year in a little while, but it's still there'll be a few of the same players if it's next year, but there's going to be quite a few different, starring roles with these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one constant outside of the coaching staff, obviously, and Jay Johnson, which we can talk about him and his legacy at some point too, is a Pearson. There's always going to be a Pearson, Zach. The Josh Pearson,
this is the
John
Pearson
and
dynasty.
Josh Pearson, and then John Pearson for next year and beyond. So as long as there's a Pearson, they got a shot. It's the Pearson dynasty.
Yeah, China had the Ming dynasty. Baton Rouge has the Pearson dynasty. Yeah, it's I think, but that is emblematic of what makes Jay Johnson such a great coach. It's not just the on-field stuff. That's important. He does a very good job with that, particularly on the hitting side. He's a guru. But the fact that he understands this current landscape of college baseball, maybe as well as anybody. Tony Vitello at Tennessee might be the other guy who comes to mind. There's a couple of others who I think get it. But he's going out and portal shopping but doing it discriminately. So he says, okay, we need help in these couple of areas, but I want the right guys to come in to play the right roles and to fit in with the team I've got. And he's shown now twice that he can do that seamlessly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just relentless effort. Recruiting. Koki and I were talking to Jay Monday morning. You've been talking to recruits? Yeah, a few. The ones who reached out to me, and he told the story of one guy who's like canceled his visit actually for Thursday because they're up here. It's like, okay, he's like, I don't know what you want, but this happened to them 2 years ago too, with a reliever who he named, right, Koki? Nate Snead.
Yes, Nate Snead was supposed to visit LSU. And Nate Snead's been Tennessee's one of their best relievers, if not their best one, for the last couple of years. He was supposed to visit LSU during the 23 season, during that 23 run, and he never visited.
That's fascinating, by the way. Just totally quick aside. Fascinating that he mentioned him by name. I wonder if that was purposeful. That he said, "Hey, you could have been here." Of course, he won the national championship with.
I think it was
when you win the national. When he wins national, so this is like second time he's done this, obviously. So after he's won the national championship, he's just been way more open with just telling us what was up, what is up. So it's been very refreshing. It's one of the best parts of when they win the national title now. This newfound tradition where Jay opens up the cupboards, so to speak. Starts talking about stuff. So that was I did not expect him to go that far though, and just say the player's name. So now we know.
He didn't tell us the other player's name, but I think if they win another national title, we're going to get that name too.
Yeah.
Eventually. But
he probably still has hopes to get that kid, whoever he is.
Yeah, perhaps.
But he's this train, as the Elton John song goes, this train don't stop. With for Jay Johnson, it's continuing to recruit and repair. One of the coaches, I can't remember who it was, Koki might remember, at the regional said he is considered to be the hardest working coach in college baseball. You can't outwork him really. And I asked him, I said, this was we asked, what are you doing? What's your last 24 hours been like, or less than that? And he's telling us about the recruitings and the team meetings and everything. But he skipped the team meeting. The team went to Fleming's Steakhouse here in Omaha because that was the thing, right, Koki? Every time they advance to another level, they have a steak dinner. He didn't go. He said, I got to prepare for the next game the next day. So the team went without him, and he's back. We haven't asked him, but we have kind of little jokes in the media like Jay comes to Omaha. These last 2 years, obviously, the 2 times they've been here with LSU. They made it all the way to the final and won the championship, and it's just a lot of empty pizza boxes stacked up outside his hotel room door or something like that. And he probably does. He goes to the ballpark in his room, and his ballpark in his room, and that's it. So it's but that's the kind of existence. It's the kind of dedication I guess it takes to do as well as they've done. Again, in this era that is so competitive, the transfer portal has leveled the playing field. Immensely, and then you have the NIL, and all these schools. On top of that, all these schools that Skip Bertman, as well as anyone, showed back in the 90s and 2000s that yes, it doesn't have to be a money loser. College baseball, it can be something that actually can break even or even turn a profit. And it's not a lot of schools do that, but just not where it's just like a bottomless pit of money. You can put money in it and get the return of being competitive. And that's why you see all these great ballparks around the SEC, and you see the SEC so good, so many schools that can win national championships, and it starts with a lot of what started at LSU back in the 80s and 90s, and so there's a lot to compete with out there, and they're at the forefront of doing it.
Yeah, no doubt. I what the feature story I want a profile of Maureen Johnson, Jay's wife, and how she puts up with it. Just like what is the life like of Mrs. Jay Johnson? He is so dedicated, and I think he's kind of hinted at it before that she's totally on board with it, which is really cool. I mean, and that's the only way that works, right? But like, she's got to be neck deep in this stuff too. She's the Garbo of LSU baseball, though. She's very nice. I said hello to her at the pep rally before the championship series, and I said hello to her today. Congratulations, But she doesn't do interviews. Jay said I don't have a problem with it, but she's not going to talk to you. So I understand. One thing I've learned in this business over 35 years, is that you can't make people talk to you, give you a quote if they don't want to give you a quote. But she's very nice. They met at Arizona. She was a soccer player there, and they've kind of made this their life's work kind of together. She is supportive, and he says, this is my life. And
when he said, the happiest days of his life were these winning these national championships, a lot of people would throw in my wedding day or something like that. But I think she understands where he's coming from.
Well, I think it's funny, Koki. We had Jay on the LSU Insider podcast before the season in our studio in Baton Rouge, and I think he even said something like, "I didn't think I would ever get married because I wanted my life to be baseball and coaching baseball, and then along comes someone who fits in perfectly with that, and I didn't think I would find that, and so she's perfect, and that's look, every relationship, every marriage is different, and that works perfectly for them. So more power to him. I didn't mean for that to become an aside about Jay Johnson's marriage, but I think Kareem probably deserves a lot of credit too.
Yeah, and it should be noted again that he doesn't have any kids. He doesn't really have any hobbies. Like, this is his life. Like, this team, this program is quite literally his life, and it's the closest thing to Nick Saban that I can find, just in terms of like work ethic, just not just wanting to turn over every single stone that can be turned over. He's turning into the Nick Saban of college baseball as we speak, with the second title in 3 years. And I don't think they're going to slow down anytime soon, just with the way that they recruit and build these rosters. And we can get into 2026 in a little bit, and that can kind of just sort of add to my point here, where they're building a monster, and we kind of knew that already. But like, this really confirms it. Like, they are truly building something here that's scary.
Yeah, agreed. Before we get to that, I did a couple more things about this season. I kind of wanted you each, and by the way, Reed shouted you out on the post-game show yesterday, Koki, for you saw every inning of every game this year with LSU.
I did.
He said every pitch. I wasn't sure if there was like a bathroom break in there where you pitches like that.
Well, if we're not including bathroom, I was in the building for every pitch.
He brings his phone with him, and he's got
you got to streaming on the play-by-play. There you go. But anyway, for both of you, but especially for you, Koki, since you were at every single game, what moments stick out to you? I mean, there's some obvious ones. Jared Jones walk-off Wednesday night in that crazy ninth inning against Arkansas. Some of the home runs against Little Rock and that comeback, like the postseason ones stick out. But throughout the season, what moments stuck out to you as sort of leading to this 8th national championship?
I think the weekend in Frisco, we tend to forget about that, but that was actually kind of a crazy weekend. Where there was the Kansas State game where Kansas State was about to score, it was the walk-off winning run, but then LSU had a perfect relay to home plate, and they threw out the runner at home. I think it was Pearson who cut the ball off, gets to Milam, and then Milam throws a dart to home plate, and they get the guy out at home. That was like the first holy crap moment of the season, I'd say. That was a big win, and they won all those games in Frisco. And then I'd say the Cade Anderson complete game shutout against Oklahoma.
That was one I thought of too.
Yes, that game was remarkable, especially given the circumstances that was going along with Nate Yeski and his father passing. And Cade was very emotional after that game, after interviewing him. And that's a game I'm going to remember for a very long time. And just remembering being like, I can't believe he's still in the game in the 8th inning, and I can't believe he's still in the game in the 9th. And all of a sudden he threw a complete game shutout. So there's that game. Zach mentioned the Jared Jones homer against Tennessee, and then the Jared Jones sack fly against he didn't hit the sack fly. Ethan Fry hit the sack fly against Arkansas in 10 innings. So those two games to win those series, to basically clinch those series victories, were absolutely huge. And then I think the next biggest moment is probably in the postseason, and those Little Rock games. Like, those Little Rock games are going to be remembered for a very long time in terms of the legacy of this team in this season, because it could have been an absolute disaster. There was a point where we thought it was going to be an absolute total disaster. And Zach, I think you said it during one of our pregame shows, where this could be the worst postseason collapse in LSU sports history. And then that turned into a championship. It's amazing. It's like, if you think about it, it's unbelievable.
One extreme to the other.
Yeah. And, I think Ethan Fry's bases clearing double, like, that changed the season. Like, there's no question about it. And Jay even referenced that game, like, saying that once we got the Little Rock win, who just started rolling. And that's what happened. They just started rolling after that. And that hit changed their year, changed the season, because they don't get that hit. Maybe we're probably not here, and maybe they've lost that game. So who knows?
Rab, he didn't leave you a whole lot of meat on that bone, but what else? What else do you remember?
Well, certainly the win against Tennessee when Jared Jones hit the mammoth home run, the 452 feet. They came back from the big deficit to win that game. That became kind of a trademark of this team. They won a lot of close games and had a lot of comebacks. They had 8 wins when they trailed by three runs or more. This season, including that Little Rock game, that game 7, when they came back to win 10-6, the one Koki referenced, and you saw that again here. Obviously, the Arkansas game, LSU came back 3 times against Arkansas, down 1-0, down 3-2, and then down 5-3 in the 9th inning. They scored those 3 runs to win 6-5. I'm told, and I will qualify this by saying I was not able to find this, but supposedly only one other time this entire season did a team come back from 2 runs down with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th to win. And that was apparently in a Big Ten tournament game that was here in Omaha at Charles Schwab Field between Michigan State and Nebraska. And I can't remember even who won. But that was like out of this there were like 269 instances of that happening this year. And only once did another team come back to win, like LSU did against Arkansas. In that game. And of course, they could have still gotten to the championship series if they'd won the next game, but they didn't have to go to that next game. They didn't
and that ruins your pitching plans too. So
yeah, and then they set up this perfect pitching situation. Where Anderson's available and Ianson's available, and Cade Anderson. I just want to take one moment just to tip the cap to him. I don't think there's ever been, of all these championships and all these great performances for LSU in the College World Series, there's ever been a pitcher who's had 2 back-to-back starts like he had in the College World Series. He gave up 1 run in 16 combined innings, against top shelf teams. One was Arkansas, who you could make the argument as that they're still the most talented team in the country this year, and 2, Coastal Carolina, which had won 26 straight games coming in here. And I don't care if you're doing that against my grandson's T-ball league. That's pretty impressive. So hats off to Cade Anderson. He was very deserving to win the MVP award for the World Series over Gage Wood, the Arkansas pitcher who threw the no-hitter against Murray State. So just that ability to never say die. That's how I think we said the Coastal and LSU came into the series both very confident, but from two different ways. Coastal from having this long winning streak, they hadn't lost for 2 months before LSU beat them in these 2 games, and then LSU from just this confidence that they're going to find a way to come back, and they did it time and time again this season. And for whatever reason, coaching, players, hitting, pitching, defense, whatever, they were able to do that, and that was the hallmark of this team. And it kind of got that big boost in that Tennessee game back in April.
Yeah, I think any baseball season has these pivot points, and you can kind of look back at individual games and say, well, if that didn't happen in that one game, it goes differently. But I agree with you guys. I mean, I think the Cade Anderson shutout at Oklahoma was just like foreshadowing for what we saw in Omaha, where it was like, this guy, when he's going good, can just pitch forever and nobody's going to hit him. And he's actually going to get stronger that game against Oklahoma, I believe the Sooners had the bases loaded in 1 out or nobody out in the first inning of that game.
Yeah.
And
right.
He struck out a couple guys with the bases loaded, got out of it. And then by the time that they were the 3rd and 4th time through the order, nobody could touch him. I mean, he was just getting better. And that was a foreshadowing to what we saw in Omaha. And Coastal, he wasn't real sharp early against Coastal on Saturday, but by the time the game ended, there wasn't anybody else who was taking that ball from him. I mean, he was shoving. And then the other one, like you talk about Ethan Fry, if Ethan Fry doesn't clear the bases, I mean, over the course of those 12, 13 innings they had played against Little Rock at that point, they had the bases loaded 4 times and gotten a single run out of them, maybe. I mean, it was like becoming a thing where LSU left the bases loaded again. They're still behind. If they don't get that hit, or if they even just score 1 or something, the later that game goes with Little Rock having, and they still had the lead. They were still at 5-4 after that, but it was like, okay, it's just 1 run. You got 6 innings left to play. They'll get a run. if it's 5-1 or 5-2, that changes the whole feeling in that stadium and in that dugout. And like, oh my gosh, is Little Rock really going to do this to LSU? Like, it was starting to feel that way anyway. And it changed. And like you said, once it changed, LSU just got on a roll and nobody was going to beat them. Every team kind of needs that scare put in them in the postseason. And that's where the Tigers came. And they overcame it, and the rest is history, literally.
I think the obvious biggest moment of the season is the Arkansas game. You know, like that game's going to be remembered for, I don't know, decades, probably.
Certainly in Fayetteville, it'll be remembered a long time.
Yeah, and that game's going to be remembered for a very long time. And I don't know if it's in terms of a quality of a game, I still think the Wake Forest win that got them to the College World Series final in 23 was the better played game. I mean, that game was 0-0 going into the 11th inning. And it was between two of the 5 best pitchers in the sport over the last 5 years on the biggest stage. That game was I still haven't seen a baseball game that was that good in person in my life. But I think this Arkansas game, just the chaos of the last couple innings was unbelievable. And the mistakes that Arkansas made defensively at the end, the back and forth, those two teams just trading blows up until literally the very last out. It was unbelievable. And I think if we're going to remember any game from this season, it's got to be that one, right? That game is going to be remembered for a very long time. And even the Kane Anderson performance, as Scott said, that's a 1-0 win in game 1 of the College World Series final. That's remarkable. And my dad and my uncle came down for the College World Series final, and they were amazed by the quality of that game and the fact that Cade even went that far. And I think the funniest thing about that performance is that 130 pitches wasn't even a season high. There were 135 against Oklahoma. So it just tells you, how important he was to this team this season.
Yeah, and the other part of that Arkansas game you mentioned, where kind of everything had to go wrong for the Razorbacks for that to happen. If Arkansas wins that game, for one thing, we don't even know if LSU makes the weekend, obviously, because they would have had to play the next night. But for another thing, even if LSU had won the next night, we may be getting ready to watch game 3 right now because LSU doesn't have Cade Anderson or Anthony Einson. I mean, I don't know what they would have done in that Thursday game if they would have gone to Anderson kind of on shorter rest, or because Einson had only thrown 30 pitches, maybe you go to him. I mean, I don't know what they would have done, but the point is their pitching situation would not have been nearly as straightforward. And so there's a good chance Coastal finds a way to pull. They were close games anyway, so Coastal finds a way to pull one out, and we're getting ready for game 3 instead of talking about this in the past tense. So that's a huge one.
We talked so many times this season about how the pitching needed the offense to catch up, because we knew the strength of this team was on the mound, especially when you have Anderson and Einson. And this was the one moment where the hitting had to pick up the pitching for a second here to win that game, to give them some extra rest, to set things up perfectly for the College World Series final. And that's what they did, quite literally, in that last inning. Jared Jones getting that base hit was absolutely huge because it prevented them from having to use Einson in that game to throw in the 10th inning, because they were going to throw him in the 10th inning if there was a 10th inning. And yes, Arkansas definitely helped them out, right? Like Behiva Aloy not turning the double play, Davallon not making that catch. That was a much tougher play than the double play. The double play, to me, in some ways, that kind of blew my mind more than this catch. Yeah, that was routine. It was just routine. The play in left field wasn't routine, at least. It was a tough play, and he hit the ball fairly hard. The play at short was routine. And that's a guy who literally won the Golden Spikes. So it is really odd. But anyway, the offense picked them up. They put guys in scoring position. They took advantage of Arkansas's mistakes, and they won that game in regulation. And winning that game in regulation was just absolutely huge. And it really it set them up for this College World Series final perfectly.
Okay, let's turn our attention to next year. And it is early to do that. I agree. But I can guarantee you Jay Johnson has already been thinking about it. And he is already hard at work. And one thing about winning a national championship is it shortens your offseason by at least a few days, if not a few weeks. And so you are playing catch up a little bit in the portal. And you mentioned, recruits canceling visits because LSU is not in Baton Rouge and things like that. This team's going to look very different. Rab. We know that. We talked about that. Cade Anderson, I believe Ethan Holiday, who's Jackson Holiday's younger brother, is the favorite to be the number one pick in next month's draft, but Cade Anderson's right behind him. Like, it's almost 50-50.
Mhm.
And if he doesn't go number one, he's going to go top 2 or 3 anyway. And then Anthony Einson will get drafted at some point. Jared Jones is going to get drafted at some point. Like, they're losing a lot from this team. So we've seen what national champions have done in the subsequent year. We saw Ole Miss and Mississippi State both crash out of the tournament. LSU, the year after they won, they almost made it out of the regional, but didn't. But they had kind of a hangover. And then this year, Tennessee, not as much, but still was not able to even get back to Omaha. They lost in the super regional. So this next year thing is, you mentioned how different and how competitive college baseball is. Repeating might be like, that's the white whale. I mean, that's really, really difficult.
It certainly is, and yeah, there'll be a lot of turnover for LSU again. I mean, it's just the nature of the sport, and especially now in the NIL transfer portal era. But you'll have some key guys back, like Derek Carriel and Stephen Milam and Ethan Fry, probably Koki. Would you say? Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting. I'm really interested to see how Major League Baseball looks at him. But
right.
Yeah,
Cason Evans back pitching. Someone like William Schmidt, who was expecting, turned out all this money, to come to LSU out of Catholic High, and didn't really contribute a whole lot. Didn't pitch here in Omaha at all. I don't believe. Some of these guys are going to look forward to next year, and they got some transfers coming in. So there's, but I agree with Koki though. I think you're like a year ago, you're like, wow, they've lost the regional, and they were this close to hosting a super regional, which meant against West Virginia, which meant they had a real good shot to get to Omaha last year, and they didn't quite do it. Now they've got all these question marks. How good are they going to be? But yet they put together a team that was wound up, preseason top 5. And in a lot of the polls, and was well respected. So I think that's where they'll be again next year. I mean, obviously you got to hit on the right guys. They got the number 1 high school recruiting class coming in. You got to try to keep those guys as many as you can. Some of them are going to go in the draft, and they get mix in a few transfers, which they've already gotten a couple. But I would expect, it won't be easy. It won't be easy, but I would expect that they're going to be a team ranked similarly to what they were going into this season.
Koki, what should LSU fans be looking for, both in the draft, transfer portal? What are you hearing? Who's going to be added to the nucleus of this team?
Yeah, they've already added 2 transfers. So Braden Simpson, who's a third baseman from High Point, hit 23 homers last year, slugged over 700. They added him to add some more juice at the plate because they're going to lose Jared Jones. And then they also had Seth Dardar, who homered off of Cade Anderson back when they were in Frisco, and when Dardar was the DH for Kansas State. So they added some power, some veteran guys. Dardar is going to be like a 6th-year senior next year. So they've already filled a couple holes here. But they're still going to need someone at second base. Not sure who that is at all yet. And then on the mound, they're going to need some left-handed help, because you're going to lose Cade Anderson. You're probably going to lose Connor Ware. I think you're going to get Cooper Williams back, which is big. But you're going to need more in terms of lefties, even if Primo returns, which is my guess is he will. So, considering all that, you're going to need some left-handed pitching help. You're going to need a second baseman. You might add another outfielder. Who knows? They like that. They usually like that 1 a year. And they'll probably add some depth at catcher, but nothing too crazy, because Aaron Beatty, I think, is going to be the slide-in starter next year at that spot. So not a ton they need to add, because they have young players who are ready to slide into these roles. And you look at Cason Evans, like, he's going to slide into the rotation next year easy. Like, that's easy. Zach Cowan, if he comes back, which my guess is he will, because I don't know how many 90 to 92 mile per hour right-handed throwers get picked as a true junior, in the first 5-ish rounds. And that's kind of what he needs. That's kind of where he needs to be if it's going to be worth his time to go to Major League Baseball early. So why not just come back as a senior and start for, potentially the best team in the country? So you could have Cowan and Evans at the top of your rotation. And that's before you even factor in William Schmidt or Cooper Williams or Jaden Newt if he decides to come back,
or a portal edition,
or a portal edition, or a freshman, depending on which of the freshmen they get. And they have the number one recruiting class in the country before this draft comes in. So I have trouble telling you exactly who is going to come to school next year, in part because there's two reasons for that. And I've talked to Jay about this already. One, the House settlement has really sort of, I guess, altered things in terms of roster sizes and whatnot, right? So we're not quite sure how many of these guys they're going to have space for to bring into the program in the first place, right? And two, they have a lot of guys who could potentially get picked. Quentin Young is one name that comes to mind. He's, I believe, the nephew of Delman Young, if I'm getting this correctly off the top of my head. And that's a guy who could get picked in the first round. He could decide to come to school. Who knows? Like, they have a lot of guys who are in that gray area.
And just to be clear, you're talking about this incoming freshman class.
Incoming freshman class. And they have a ton of guys who are like on the borderline. They could get picked in the first or second round, or they could just come to school. Like, we don't really know. Briggs McKenzie's a left-handed pitcher. He's another guy. They have a ton of players who are kind of on the cusp of whether they leave or whether they come or they never show up. And it's going to be really interesting to see how many of these guys they're going to convince to come to school. And they have a very, very deep class, and they also don't have a lot of guys who it's obvious that he's going to pro ball. Brady Ebel is another one who's actually the son of Dino Ebel, who's the third base coach for the Dodgers right now. He could get picked in the second round, or he could come to school. I don't know. I just want to throw a couple names out there just so people can get comfortable with them before I start writing about them more and we get more in depth on it. But yeah, I think when we look at next year's team, you're going to get a very strong freshman class, maybe even deeper than the one that came in this year. Maybe not quite as top heavy, but maybe arguably deeper. And you're also bringing back a lot of players that just won the national championship to go along with some very selective portal additions, specific guys to fill specific needs, which is what they've mostly done until last season. So that's kind of what you're looking at heading into this offseason and into next year.
Yeah, and I think one advantage LSU has in this modern era is they are going to get more NIL dollars for baseball than a lot of programs are. They're going to convince kids to stick around. Like you talk about a Zach Cowan. Should you stick around? Well, guess what? You're going to get paid almost as much here as you would if you were a fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth round pick.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's, and same thing with the incoming freshmen. You look at William Schmidt, Derek Curiel, Dylan Cruz a few years ago. Like, they wanted to come to LSU over going pretty high in the draft, whereas 10, 20 years ago that wouldn't have even been a conversation. So that's a huge advantage LSU has as they continue to try to build this team and keep going. We've used the D word, we've said dynasty, like that's what they're after right now. And so I think being a part of that process is attractive to guys as well. And we'll see if LSU can kind of run it back and at least make a return trip to Omaha next year and be, I don't even know the last national champion that made it back to Omaha. Do you know that off the top of your head?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's been at least 5 years.
It's been a while. Yeah. It's hard for them to even get back to Omaha. Like, Florida got back last year, but they lost the championship, right? Yeah. So we've had runner-ups return. I don't remember last winner to go back the very next season. So like that alone is a challenge that they're going to have to go through. Even the next year, guess what the expectation is going to be? It's going to be to get back to Omaha. Because that's always the expectation. It should be, given how many players they'll have returning next year.
I guess if you so Vanderbilt won the title in 2019 and they made it back to the finals in 2021. Obviously there was no season in 2020. So that's the last one to kind of make it back to the next College World Series, but that one has an asterisk. So if not for that, you have to go back before COVID to find a team that made it back to to Omaha after winning the national title. And you got to go back all the way to
2010 and 2011.
South Carolina, 2010, 11 to find a repeat champion. So it'll have been 15 years by next season. So that's what LSU is after next. And I don't think anybody shies away from that. And that's where I want to end this show with one more question. First, I do, guys, want to let everybody know, Koki, you mentioned this earlier, store.theadvocate.com. You can get these cool posters, poster pages from the championship poster that the players had on the field. You can purchase those either in newspaper form or like an actual poster page that can be framed. And then the other one is the Great 8 book that's coming out soon. You can pre-order that and I believe get 20% off. It's like $32 or something. It'll be full of Koki's writing through the season, Scott's writing through the season, a lot of our great photography from Hillary Scheinek and Michael Johnson. Like they will be heavily featured as well. Those are cool things to have for LSU fans. They're cool gifts. So check that out at store.theadvocate.com. Okay, last question I wanted to ask you, and you did talk about this a little bit, Koki. Ryan McGee of ESPN wrote a story on ESPN.com this morning that kind of proclaimed, and I think maybe it's obvious, and that's my question for you guys is it obvious? No qualifiers, no greatest program of the 21st century, no greatest program of the last 40 years, none of that. Is LSU the greatest program in college baseball history now? USC's got 12 titles, LSU's only got 8, and other teams have made it to Omaha more than 20 times. But the combination of trips to Omaha, titles, and the era in which they did it, can you remove all qualifiers, Rab, and say LSU is the greatest college baseball program?
There's lots of ways to look at it, and it's purely subjective, right? I mean, one person's set of qualifications for something like that is going to be something else that someone just dismisses and said that's not part of it. And I think you have to give Texas some due. Like I said, they started coming here and winning back in the 40s, and they've been here like 30. I want to say Texas has been to the CWS 38 times, or something like that. So you have to give them some credit. And USC, they did win them. I mean, they did win all those titles, but and LSU was not the only knock against LSU. And I bring up these schools that have won over long periods of time, is that for a very long time LSU was not good at all at college baseball. I mean, it just was an afterthought at LSU, even less than an afterthought. Their only NCAA tournament appearance, not College World Series appearance, but NCAA tournament appearance before Skip Bertman arrived in 1984 came in 1975. So, one trip to the NCAA tournament. So Ole Miss, and I'm picking on Ole Miss, using an example. They came to the World Series back in the 60s. Archie Manning played in the College World Series for Ole Miss. So there were a lot of other schools that did it over a long stretch of time. But boy, this is the era, again, that Skip Bertman helped to bring about. This is the most competitive era of college baseball. There's easily, 8, 9, 10 programs in the SEC, probably more, that could win the national. You could win the national championship. A bunch of them have by now, about that number, and they could win. Most years. You say, well, this particular year or that particular year, but in general, it's gotten so much more competitive. And to win 8, the next closest team is Oregon State, who won 3 since LSU started winning them. And then after that, it's a good number of teams won 2. Vanderbilt has won 2 in that time span. Texas has won a couple. Miami, won a couple, though they haven't done it lately. I'm sorry, what?
South Carolina,
won back-to-back in 2010 and 2011. So there's been several, but it's not that same level of success that LSU has mastered. So I think it's a little shorter time frame, but compared to some of these, to a USC or a Texas, but or Florida State even, or Oklahoma State, but more success, by far in the toughest era of LSU's been the most dominant in the toughest era of college baseball. Yeah, it's the best program of all time.
Koki?
LSU has made the College World Series 20 times in the past 40 seasons. I don't that's like that. So once every 2 years, they finish in the final 8 at least. And they won the title 8 times within that span, and 8 times in the past 35 years, as the graphic says at the bottom. So if that, no one else has that, or no one else is really even that close to that, at least I don't believe. So, I'm going to trust on Rab with the history. He knows it, like it's the back of his hand. but 20 times in 40 years, that's absurd. I thought it was absurd when we were talking about it a couple weeks ago, and I still think it's absurd today.
Yeah, and they won 8 in 8 of those appearances, 8 out of 20.
Yeah,
I mean,
right. That's almost half of the time with 8 teams at it. Yeah, each one.
Yeah, it's absurd. The hit rate is absurd.
I don't think there's any argument if you're saying of the last 40 years, even of the last 50 years. There's no doubt then.
Yeah.
The only argument is when you start bringing in the early era of college baseball, as you said, Rab, and Ron Dedeaux and those USC teams of the 60s and 70s. And I think they won 9 titles in 11 years or so. I mean, which I'm not taking anything away from them. A fantastic achievement. But there were probably even half the number of teams even playing and even less than that who were taking it seriously at that time. And now it's just about every major team in the country is taking it seriously and shooting for this. So I don't know. It's certainly a subjective question, as you said, but LSU is right there. If there's a Mount Rushmore, LSU is on it. There's no question about that at this point. And I think the big thing is what I said before, because it's not just now that one dynasty and then you added on a couple titles over the next 20 years. Now you're entering a second era of greatness. And if LSU can even add one more title here in the next few years, I think you've got 2 distinct dynasties, 2 distinct D words, right? Those dynasties, and having that in separate eras really lends a lot of credence to the fact that they are the best ever. So, hey, tell you what, we will cover it every step of the way. These 2 guys are going to fly back tomorrow and get a little R&R, and then they will be right back at it. Koki will be tracking the draft and the offseason and the portal. You can read all of that at theadvocate.com/LSU. Rab, you and kind of the rest of us will turn our attention to football. We're going to have a couple of football podcasts over the next couple of weeks as well. So look for those. I sat down with Wilson Alexander and recorded a couple of those. So we don't slow down. We take a little R&R and then we get right back at it. So keep it locked to the LSU Sports Insider podcast channel, the podcast feed, and the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. Appreciate everybody tuning in all postseason long. For Koki Riley and Scott Rabalais, I'm Zach Ewing, and this has been the LSU Sports Insider.